Saint Helena Island. Saint Helena. The world that once bowed to me is now nothing more than a piece of rock. A place where even the wind is cross with me, where even the waves turn their faces away. I wake before the sun rises now, because in my mind the mornings still begin with the sound of cannons. But here the only sound echoes within me. What was it all for Napoleon? I once said, I answer not to God, but to history. But history does not answer. It only watches. It looks at you like a distant star. I burned to reach that star. I scorched, I rose, and I fell. And now, I am just a man left alone with his thoughts. Exile, silence, and memories. Sometimes as heavy as a bullet. Sometimes as light as a kiss. I am Napoleon Bonaparte. I was born in 1769 in Ajaccio, Corsica. I was no child of kings, no favorite of the palaces. I grew up knowing the land, but I always looked to the sky, because those on the ground had learned to bow, while I learned to stand up. When I was born in Corsica, no one looked at me and said, "Behold, the emperor." When my mother called me
Napoleon,
it was just the name of a son. But I was a small boy with big dreams. While everyone else was concerned with fishing and farming, I looked at the stars. I would draw maps. With a pen, I would divide countries, and with a child's innocence, I would build empires. Little did I know that one day, that innocence would be written in blood. There was only one thing I learned as a child. Respect comes with power. And so I wanted power, more than anything. As a young boy, I stared at the sea and said, "How big can the world truly be?" It turns out, every storm begins in the heart of a child. I was sent to France when I was just 9 years old. When I arrived, my language was different. Even my name was not French. But the language of weapons was universal, of cannons, of swords, of commands. In the army of this country, whose language I did not even know, I forged my own destiny. I became an officer at a young age. I remember the first sentence I wrote in the margin of my notebook at the military academy. Either I will rise to the heavens, or I will be buried in history. The first time I won a victory, the people did not even see me. But on that day, I felt the spark of a kingdom within me. Victory. Once you taste it, nothing else is ever enough. Not love, not friendship, not sleep. Just once more and once more again. The siege of Toulon in 1793. When I raised the French flag in Toulon, they heard my name for the first time. The people began to talk about me. I was no longer just a soldier. The sound of my cannons shaped the future of a nation. Then, in 1795, I suppressed the royalist uprising in Paris. It was not just the cannons that made me General Bonaparte, but my fearlessness. That young man still burns inside me. If you are brave, time is yours. I was becoming a hope, a legend. And on that day, for the first time, I looked in the mirror and said to myself, if you do not stop, the world will bow. In the autumn of 1795, I met Josephine at a ball in Paris. At that time, I was a young general. She, an elegant widow who had managed to survive the aftermath of the Revolution. She had 2 children and was a favorite in aristocratic circles. I can never forget the warmth in her eyes during our first encounter. She taught me not the harshness of war, but the refinement of life. In that period, France was still recovering. I, on the other hand, was in pursuit of victory, on the verge of rising. Was it love? Perhaps. But one thing was certain. I had a weakness for her. We married in 1796. Immediately after, I departed for the Italian campaign. With every victory I won in northern Italy, I thought of her. There was longing in every letter I wrote, but learning that she was finding solace in other arms in Paris burned me. I loved Josephine, but I could not trust her. While I was becoming a man of victories on one hand, a void was growing within me on the other. Years passed. I became consul, then emperor. Perhaps my greatest victory was losing you. Perhaps my greatest defeat was loving you. I do not know. The only thing I needed to know was this. France wanted an heir, Josephine. She was a queen, but she could no longer be a mother. Though my heart was breaking, I had to leave her. To remove her from the throne was to decide the fate of a country. And I replaced you not with a child in my eyes, but with an empire. I traded you for the throne. I chose the tears of a nation over the eyes of a woman. Was it love, or did duty prevail? Even today, I cannot answer that. But what I do know is that the day I left her, I became a lonely man. I could never forget the hurt in Josephine's eyes. As she left the palace, she had said,
"France will never forgive you."
Perhaps she was right. But fate owed me an heir. I had no child from Josephine. As much as I loved her, an heir was necessary for the future of the empire. In 1810, in Vienna, I married Archduchess Marie Louise of Austria from the House of Habsburg. This marriage was a matter of diplomacy and the mixing of blood. It was not a matter of love, but of calculation. However, Marie Louise gave me a son. He was born in Paris on March 20th, 1811. We named him Napoleon François Joseph Charles Bonaparte. The people of France knew him as the King of Rome. At that moment, I was the most powerful man in the eyes of history. I thought myself immortal. It was as if even time had bowed to me. A throne, a son, an empire. All were in my hands. But the fall of pride begins precisely at the zenith. I could not see my son long enough to play with him, to give him counsel, to protect him from wars. Marie-Louise never loved me. She returned to Vienna and took our son with her. My son grew up in Vienna, raised not as a Frenchman, but as a Habsburg prince. I do not even remember the last time I saw him. And the most painful thing was this. Even the memory of him could not be a remedy for my loneliness in my final years. When my son died of tuberculosis at the age of 21, they said he was an Austrian, not a Frenchman. Just as Josephine had said,
France has taken its revenge.
I placed the crown with my own hands. France had been dragged into chaos after the Revolution. In 1799, I became consul with the Coup of 18 Brumaire. I sought to build a new order from the remnants of the Republic. For 5 years, I earned the trust of the people. And finally, the time came to stand before history. December 2nd, 1804. Notre Dame Cathedral, Paris. Pope Pius VII was there, but only as a witness, because on that day a tradition was broken. When the Pope wanted to offer the crown to me, I took it from his hands and placed it on my own head. In that moment, I did not just wear a crown, I shouldered the destiny of a nation. Because no one placed me on the throne, I conquered that throne myself, with my sword, with my intellect, with the hopes of the people. In that moment, the heart of Europe was beating in France. But the weight of that crown was not just of gold. That crown was the burden of my victories, the hope of my people, and the fear of my enemies. And of course, it was a sign of my own hubris. Unfortunately, like every ascent, this too was a harbinger of a fall. The silence of Moscow. Moscow. That ominous winter, those endless roads. It pierced my soul with its cold loneliness. That city didn't just burn, it turned the pride within me to ash as well. Tens of thousands of soldiers, tens of thousands of lives. Perhaps not a single tear of mine fell upon the snow. But my heart was weeping blood. That was my greatest mistake. I set out for Moscow with 600,000 soldiers. And when I returned, only 100,000 were by my side. I conquered Moscow, but I lost myself there. It was not our enemies, but the cold, the hunger, and the distance that suffocated us. That retreat, those frozen rivers, that sound of bones. No victory had ever been so heavy. Not only that, but I had rejected Tsar Alexander's offer of peace. Victory was so close. But when I entered Moscow, I saw the ashes of an empty triumph. As I returned, the people still looked at me with admiration. But I was a different man now, not just a man who had won a war, but a man who had lost his humanity. And I understood that no matter how much you win, a person is only truly defeated when they are overcome by themselves. Arrogance, it seems, does not guide one on a map of snow. I learned this too late. In 1814, Paris fell. When the Allied armies entered the city, the love of the people could no longer protect me. I abdicated the throne. I was exiled to the island of Elba, a small, ordinary island. There, they gave me a little empire. It was ridiculous. I, who once ruled Europe, was now drawing shipping routes and building roads on an island. But no plan could extinguish the fire within me. After 10 months, in February 1815, I escaped. I set out from Elba with a small group. When I reached France, my first stop was the shores of Gulf Juan. My old troops stood before me. They aimed their weapons at me. I simply told them this: "Your emperor has returned. If any of you wish to kill me, here I am." And they knelt. Once again, belief outweighed orders. As I entered Paris, the people once more poured into the streets. They embraced not me, but my idea. That brief period, which history books call the 100 Days, perhaps they were the most honest days of my life. It was a rise based not on war, but on belief. But deep down I knew Europa would not forgive me. Waterloo? That damned hill. The English, the Prussians, the rain. That morning, I felt history turn its back on me for the last time. But fate rarely smiles upon a second chance. Waterloo, the final act of my life. It was as if even the sky had decided that day would be my end. June 18th, 1815. Waterloo. On Belgian soil, it was one of the darkest mornings in history. Facing me were the English Wellington and the Prussian Blücher. The rain that fell throughout the night had bogged down my artillery in the mud. Even the ground was against me. By the time I realized Grouchy could not stop the Prussians, it was too late. Ney's cavalry charges were undisciplined. History would place the burden of this defeat on my shoulders, not those of my general. But time betrayed me. The Prussian army arrived sooner than I expected. My soldiers were weary, my generals hesitant. As my eyes gazed toward the horizon, I understood that history had abandoned me. That day, I did not just lose a battle. I buried my own legend. On June 22nd, I abdicated for the second time. This time, there would be no return. France no longer needed me. It needed peace. Waterloo was not an end, but a judgment. And this judgment was not delivered in a court of law, nor by a king. It was the moment of decision in the court that history had convened for me. I submitted, because I finally understood. A man is known not by his dreams, but by his mistakes. And now, in the middle of the Atlantic, a desolate piece of rock, Saint Helena. This place will be my tomb. I was once the master of Europe. Now I speak with the wind. I have no friends. My son is far away, and memories are as sharp as a dagger. 1821. This year will be the last to bear my name. But I know this. History will not forget me. And the year 1814. A letter arrived on Saint Helena. Josephine is dead. Her last words, they say, were
Napoleon.
Perhaps the only true battle I ever lost was the one to win her heart. All this blood, all this destruction. For what? To carve my name into history? Well, will the voice of history forgive me? Am I a man, or merely an image? Number, I do not regret it, because I am a soldier. I did not write history. I tried to conquer it. If, hundreds of years from now, you still speak my name, it means I have won. Such wars, such loves, such betrayals, they all pass before my eyes. Are there many things I wish had been different? Yes, but am I sorry? Number, because I fulfilled my own destiny. I asked no one's permission. I did not bow to God, to kings, to peoples. I only offered my head to history, for it to fix me there for all time. If my name is still remembered, that is a victory. Because history remembers not the conquerors, but those who leave a mark. For the greatest empire is the one built in the memory of men.
And you, O man of the future, remember, it is not God who will judge me, but time.